resources here at Wolfson Campus for inviting this conversation about place-based learning. And here at Wolfson, we've been talking about place-based learning for what will be obvious reasons in a minute, but we really appreciate them expanding this conversation among us and get us talking about teaching and learning. In preparing for the conversation today, I was thinking that this really is such a privileged space to be able to come here and talk about teaching and learning. There are 1,700 people who work at Wolfson Campus. 1,700 people who work at Wolfson Campus, full and part-time. And everything they do, emptying a wastebasket, cleaning a sink, filling out an RPA, all of that is to support this conversation. So, you know, I'm kind of a nerd. Those things make me a little emotional, you know, that all these people, it's also that we can do this, teach, learn, and be in conversation about teaching and learning. So very excited to do that. So, so today we're talking about place-based learning, also the pedagogy of place. And every now and then I'm going to read a little bit. This is from one of the writers of place-based learning. We are surrounded by places. We walk over and through them. We live in places, relate to others in them, die in them. Nothing we do is unplaced. How could it be otherwise? How could we fail to recognize this primal fact? Nothing we do is unplaced. So in terms of a student and their relationship to learning, they understand to some degree about place because they sit in places. They are placed. Nothing we do is unplaced. Fail to recognize this primal fact. Primal, it's a gut thing. And imagine teaching by using something that is primal. Imagine how easily one can connect to something that is primal, that is gut. You don't have to really reach far. You don't have to go access it because it is primal. So place-based learning attaches to place, placedness, and that is a primal thing. Okay, so a definition of place-based learning. What we mean by place-based learning education is always a co-evolving collaborative experience. So the learner is changing, the faculty person is changing, the community is changing. And I'm sorry, Patrick, to do this. Do you go back one picture? So here is our campus, basically, downtown Miami. So the picture on the left, there's the Dyer building. You see the courthouse? Yeah. With no tall buildings behind it, no building one. You see, and then to the right is more of a current picture of our campus. People in these places were different, are different because the places at the time were different. So how they were thinking, what they were doing, certainly it's not the same as today. What was it? Just looking at this picture, for example, I don't see a lot of skirts. I see one, two, right? So even that experience of who was out there on the construction site, who was developing it, who was talking about it. So what was that experience for everybody, for the women, for the men, anybody who was a part of that? Sorry. All right, so back to definitions, and there's a lot written. Smith was probably the first to write, Gregory A. Smith was the first to write about place-based learning more than 20 years ago. So there's different takes on place-based learning, and we'll talk a little bit about those distinctions too. People who are more into critical pedagogy, an aspect of place-based learning. But here's one definition. So collaborative activity that makes salient, so it makes relevant the cultural, historical, political, economic, environmental, social, and physical aspects of what we are teaching about math, about art, about history, about economics. It makes the environment relevant. And that's, again, the students are in that place. So now I'm relevant because I'm part of that place where economics is happening. I'm part of that place where art is happening. So it develops student sense of place. It promotes learning in context. And of course, you as learning people know how contextual learning is so important. It helps me attach to the learning, so it's stickier. It engages students in their community. So this is definitely a community-related practice. So if you don't want to be out there in community, you're probably not going to like this kind of pedagogy. It engages diverse populations because, again, you're out there in the community, you're engaging with different people, maybe people who are very different from yourself. So students will have to practice that, engaging in diversity. And again, it explores the local phenomena, the local issues, and point here is that it will emphasize the physical too. So it could be about environmental things, the ocean and the air and the temperature and things like that. So it helps students understand, have a sense of place, but also understand the world better and thus understand themselves better, because I am in relation to the world, right? So it's kind of a growing of their identity, understanding their relationship to where they are. Okay, so some of the benefits of place-based learning. So with community in their name, it is imperative that community colleges own and extend the idea of place in their curriculum. If you've heard me give welcomes here and there sometimes, I often say that we are a community college, and that means that we are of and for the community. That is a different mission than a university. The university also has a research mission, that can invent suntan lotion and things like that. But that is not our mission. Our mission is to be of and for the community. So we are developing individuals so that they can develop their communities. They may move to California, but that's not really what we're about. We're about a curriculum that is relevant to their local area that will sustain them in this community. So it increases student sense of agency because typically there is a project. It's not necessary, but typically there's some sort of project a student is doing. And so they're making decisions, they're taking actions, they see change in the community based on what they're doing. So they see that, okay, I'm a person in this world who can do things. I can have impact. It also improves academic concepts because as that's happening, they say, I want to learn more then. Wow, I did this with what I know now. Imagine what I could do as I learn more and grow more and make more connections. So students tend to do better. Strengthens connections between students and communities, so that seems obvious because you're out there doing things with the different communities, community agencies, community stakeholders. Studies have shown that it improves mental health. This piece about improving mental health is more related to place-based learning where people are out in nature. So where you get to see blue sky, green trees, the ocean. So they found that that has had mental health benefits for students who are doing that.
The Everglades.
The Everglades, you can go there. It's kind of hot right now, but it's wonderful. And they have shown that it increases empathy and cooperation. Again, that makes sense. They're in a community, they're dealing with people, learning how to negotiate, learning to listen, to understand what's happening in the community. It narrows equity gaps. Because again, everyone gets a chance to do this. It's not some special thing that only, say, honors college students get to do or some elite group of students get to do. Everybody gets to do it. And again, if we're doing it at a community college, even more so closing equity gaps. You saw that it improves academic outcomes. So at a place, again, like a community college, it would really help to elevate the community. Grow civic responsibility, because again, I'm doing things in my community and making changes. And so I say to myself, wow, this is a part of who I am now and what I can keep doing for my community. And it increases environmental consciousness. So again, that is an aspect of place-based learning, that the physical environment matters. All right, so I thought it might be worthwhile to look at other methods that are sort of related, have some things in common with place-based learning, but just a little different. Place-based learning is just a little different. So I listed the distinctions. So experiential learning. In both place-based learning and experiential learning, you have a direct experience with the subject matter that you're trying to learn more about, and there's some sort of reflection experience. But with place-based learning, again, that local community is where I'm engaging. Project-based learning, again, with project-based and place-based, there's a complex task. And usually there's some sort of final project or presentation. Project-based, so it could be on any project, it can be anywhere, whereas again, place-based learning is more the local context. Service learning, you know what that is, you're engaging in service, it's very dedicated to the service that you're doing to that community, to that group. Place-based learning doesn't necessarily have to have a service aspect to it, and I'll show you some examples of that distinction. And then community-based learning, which is probably the closest to place-based learning. But community-based learning doesn't necessarily emphasize the physical as much as place-based learning does. Place-based learning is saying, be out there physically in the environment. What is that like? Let's go back for a second, please, Patrick. So as we're looking at these different methods, I would say some distinctions about place-based learning. Okay, place-based learning, out there in the place. How is it different? And maybe these even further, Beatrice. What else about it? So again, looks both at the human phenomenon, what's happening socially, culturally, but also physically. So it is looking at things like the weather and migration birds and things like that. So if you're in science, those are the things that you could look at. It does encourage students to be a change agent. Service learning may, community-based learning might, experiential doesn't necessarily, project-based doesn't necessarily, but with place-based learning, you are encouraging that change agent aspect of the individual, the student. And finally, place-based learning does have a concern for justice, because if it's looking at the community and for the community to be optimal, to be at its best, justice is part of health. So it does look to expand justice. And I know justice, sometimes words make us nervous, but Cornel West said that justice is what love looks like in public. Love is not scary, right? Love is wonderful. So justice is what love looks like in public. And place-based learning does seek to advance justice. Okay, let's talk about ABCD. Thank you. So because this is not exactly place-based learning, but I did think I should mention it. Because if you're going to be engaged with place-based learning, that means you're going to be out there in the community and dealing with different groups and different neighborhoods and all of that. ABCD, asset-based community development, a strategy for sustainable community-driven development where people recognize what the assets are of the community, they value those assets of the community, and they use those assets of the community to keep making the community better. So in other words, it's not going into a community, a neighborhood, an area and saying, wow, this is so broken. This is so messed up. Thank goodness we're here to bring all these great ideas from Miami-Dade College, right? So that would not be asset-based community development. That would be very insulting. The students wouldn't learn, because if you think you're coming in with all these great ideas, then you're not listening to what the community knows and what the community assets are. So really, this is just sort of an idea to have side by side with place-based learning, to keep in mind, how are we going into the communities? Are we always going in with this model, as we should, asset-based community development? The community has assets. What is the community telling us about how else they need to use these assets? How do we attach these micro assets to the greater macro assets? So just a thought to be a companion to place-based learning. Oh, I need Patrick Sunshine. So here's an example. You know how I said they don't necessarily have to be service projects. You know, turning in a service to someone. Here's a project here at Wolfson Campus. So this is the Metro Mover First Street Inner Loop. So that's the one by the Yotel. And right behind it, there's a patch, basically a patch of grass. But dog poop is what it has right now. And so Eileen Higgins, our commissioner here for this area, is working to develop that piece. And we work together with Abraham Aliusio, great architecture faculty, and they came up in teams, they came up with concepts to develop this park. I'm allowed to call it a park because of rules, so they're calling it the Connect Spot. Can you imagine? So they got they were engaged in working with the city planners, getting all the plans, all the different elevations of the site. I mean, they had to do all this county work in order to get the materials they needed to do this project. They, in teams, came up with all these different concepts that were amazing. Maybe if you're here at Wolfson, you saw them in Building 2. They had them displayed in the breezeway one day. Can you imagine the sense of agency, the sense of connection to their community? The improvement in their focus, all of these things that these students have when this project eventually comes to fruition. The commissioner wasn't going to pick one design, they're taking pieces that you can take your fellow students, you can take your family to a park I helped to design in Miami-Dade County as a community college student at Miami-Dade College. That's amazing. So it wasn't really quite service. There's obviously the improvement of the community involved here. There was a lot of listening to community members in the county. And this was that project. So here's another partnership with the underlying. So a few different things happened here. So in terms of people in business, students developed some pop-up businesses and they were there at the underlying, and the underlying is trying to create a sense of place. Hey, it is a place where you can go and exercise and come eat with your family and be entertained. Great place. So those were business students. Then we had biology students here and from North Campus who helped with the native plants that they wanted to do along the underline. And they wanted to do indigenous things that would attract butterflies and birds, indigenous creatures. So biology students worked on that. And then magic students worked on an app so that when you're going through the underline and looking at these plants, you can identify what they are and learn more about those plants and the different species of butterflies and all those things. So again, this wasn't really service in the way you think about other service learning. So it doesn't have to be some sort of direct service project. So these were a couple. So I thought, let's put up some other examples, and I know you're going to hear great examples from the panel, a faculty panel that is coming up in a moment. But here are just some other examples to think about. Analyze access to neighborhood parks. So a class could do that. What kind of disciplines could use that? Math, political science, sociology, health studies. Map local food deserts. What disciplines does that make sense with? Health, public administration, economics, science, business. Tell stories of people who give a place its identity. English, communications, art, sociology, history. So really any subject, any place can engage in place-based learning. Even if you think, wow, I'm off, some part of town and it's kind of barren, there's not much here, there's always something. You go outside, you take your classes outside, they will come to observe something, whether it's the sounds, the creatures, the bugs, there will be something that will speak to you and to your students. So it's possible anywhere. Yes, in Miami-Dade County, there's a lot of stimulation, so there's a lot to give you ideas, but really it could be done anywhere. And just to touch on this last quote, in here, you know how I said that within place-based education, there are different camps, and some people are more into the critical pedagogy aspect of it. Critical pedagogy, in other words, looking at oppressive systems in education and how do we get rid of them so that everybody has an equal chance of learning. And so David Grunwald, who is now, I think Grunwald's changed his name, says, place-conscious education aims to work against the isolation of schooling's discourses and practices from the living world outside the increasingly placeless institution of schooling. Because things get homogenized and they come from above and it's not local as much anymore, right? It's from your own stuff, from the people here. Furthermore, it aims to enlist teachers and students in the firsthand experience of local life and in the political process of understanding and shaping what happens there. So again, it's raising that student sense of agency that they can do things in their community for their community. And what is it that needs to be better in our community? Where would our community be healthier? How could our community be healthier? In all the ways that health is considered. And then I'd like to just read one thing. And this is from Gregory Smith, because I know in education things happen and we're like, that's just the flavor of the week. And, is it really something? This is just a vote for place-based education. In most respects, there is nothing new about place-based education. It is an attempt to reclaim elements of the learning processes most children encountered before the invention of schools. Throughout most of humanity's tendency on this planet, children learn directly from their own experience in places and communities where they lived. They explored their world with peers, imitated the activities of adults, participated in cultural and religious ceremonies, and listened to the conversations and stories of families and neighbors. In this way, children grew into competent and contributing members of their society, able to care for themselves and for others in ways that sustained the community of which they were a part. This outcome, with its focus on both individual and social sustainability, is also the goal of place-based education. So that's Gregory Smith, the one who I told you started writing about place-based education about more than 20 years ago. So sort of a little taste of place-based education, some definitions, some contrast with others, some benefits of it, some ideas that there do sit different camps in place-based education. I guess you'll decide where you sit and what you want to do with place-based education. But now we have a really nice opportunity to hear from professors here at MDC College and Wolfson Campus. And Wen Lee is going to come up and talk about a great opportunity, folks who are dabbling. And as folks come up, I'll share that some folks had the opportunity to visit DePaul University, who's considered a great example of place-based learning. All students are required to participate in the Chicago quarter, where the classes are about being out in Chicago. Could be music, could be history, could be anything, but they're out in the city.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. I'm honored to introduce a lot of the faculty, and Michael Matthews is part of the Earth Ethics Institute. He has taken part of our trip to DePaul University. DePaul University is one of the grandfather of place-based learning, and they have their faculty engaged in place-based learning, where faculty have opportunities to submit their own perspective or their own proposal of what the Chicago experience is about, and to allow the students to engage in those activities and allow them to elect which part of Chicago that they want to be a part of. Michael is part of the Earth Ethics Institute. Would you please go up so we can have the conversations about place-based learning? I also have Professor Alejandro Angi. In arts and philosophy.
In social science.
Social science, yes. Alejandro is the facilitator for our place-based learning faculty learning communities. He has taken that trip, or he's visited DePaul. And then we also have Professor Maria Villar from the English department. She is also part of our place-based learning FLC, and she participated in conversations about place-based learning. So one of the first questions that I wanted to ask everybody was, for your visit with DePaul, how did your experience at DePaul University influence your understanding of place-based learning and your appreciation for place-based research?
Oh, okay, great. Well, when I started the group, I didn't know that much about place-based learning, but I just basically broke down the 3 words: place, based, and learning. And I figured, everywhere you are is a place where you can learn, right? So it was through the trip that I realized how many resources, I knew about it before, how many resources we have. And I tried to figure out a way how the program there could be done here. So we went there and we met with faculty, we met with the dean, and he showed us around, he explained the program, and it's incorporated into their student orientation. So it's an added week that the students have after their initial orientation. And in that added week, they get an expanded view of Chicago. They learn more about Chicago. They go out into Chicago. So that's how they envisioned and how they practiced their place-based learning. So it was through that experience and listening to them to see how they did it. So we can very easily do that here. However, we first have to really assess, where we are, what resources we have, and then curate which resources we want to expose our students to more than anything. And then, doing it through like a hierarchy, in terms of what would be the most important, least, etc. And then roll out a program that way. So using Miami as a place where our students could then learn. How many of our students just come to campus and leave? How many of our faculty staff just come to our campus and leave? You talk about a place downtown where you were mentioning, how many of us take a walk during lunch to explore, to see what's out there? Few of us do. So being part of Alejandro's group, Place Based Now, we're brainstorming and we're thinking about different ways that we can incorporate some of those objectives and then tie them into perhaps some course objectives and institutional objectives to create something feasible for our students, and maybe attach it to an orientation or attach it to an SLS course. So just using the city that we live in was so rich in so many cultures as a place to expose our students to things that they're not usually exposed to.
Awesome. Thank you. For me, the trip to the Pole University was like more like enlightenment about the kinds of things that can be done, right? So they do have a program where, as Professor Rilar just mentioned, all students is it mandatory? I think, right? It's like they're not encouraged. They're made to go out into the city through one of the courses that is offered as they come in their first year. So we thought a lot about that, right? For us teaching at a community college, and we're governed by the state of Florida. So what is possible, what is doable, what is not? But at the end of the day, I think that program, and we can talk a little bit more about that program, is kind of testament to what can be done if there is an intention and there's a plan and there's a buy-in from this community, right? From the college community, this context, right? The university community. So for me, it was eye-opening of like the kinds of things that can be done when there is an intention and when there is a plan and when there is a desire to put these kinds of programs in place.
It was eye-opening for me as well. One of the things that stuck in my mind was in this Chicago quarter, this orientation class, it was, even though it was kind of like equivalent to the SLS or student life skills in a way, it kind of went beyond that because it wasn't like, it was the general faculty were teaching it. So you could have a professor in dance or architecture or science teaching one of these classes, and they're going to introduce you to Chicago through the lens of their discipline. So if you're a dance student, you're going to learn about dance in Chicago, or if you're an art student, you're learning about art. There was one where they were doing the bridges of Chicago. So you're doing this whole quarter learning about the bridges and the architecture in Chicago. So I thought that was really powerful and a way to really connect students to the faculty in a different way maybe. So instead of taking the faculty's discipline, you're kind of getting to know them more as a person instead of an authority figure. And I think there is a lot of applications for place-based learning. For me, for Earth Ethics Institute, our flagship program is Global Sustainability and Earth Literacy Studies, or GSELS, for short, GSELS, where different faculty college-wide are incorporating Earth literacy and environmental awareness into whatever they teach. And I think that this is also a type of place-based learning. It would be great to kind of bring a more intentional focus on that into the GSELS classes. So for example, I was thinking about just right here in the Wolfson campus area, look at all the stuff we have around us, from the Miami River, the port, Overtown, all this historic stuff is right here. And, how much of an introduction to Miami could we bring to our students just looking at the Wolfson campus area, or for each campus, how much are we aware of the history of Kendall? It might be really interesting to learn more about what happened out there. So I think that there's a lot that we done with place-based education. I should also mention that I think that I would argue that place-based education is a type of change making, because that's, Earth Ethics Institute is part of change making here at Miami-Dade College. And so we are connecting students to the community. And so there is that type of place-based education already happening here, but it would be good, again, to have more of an intentional focus on it.
Adding to that, or to continue the conversation of place-based learning, how do you feel as a faculty and implementing place-based learning, looking at the assets that we have in the Wolfson campus? Michael, you have more than just the Wolfson campus to consider. Thinking about that, what are some of the
discussed that a lot in the group. To begin with, there are some things that we're already doing, most of us, or in some context. I have my study abroad program to Japan that I share with Professor Augustine. There is, immersions to the Everglades at Air Traffic Institutes too. There is service learning that we encourage our students to do more or less in an individual basis, right? They themselves have to go out and do that. So all of those are forms of place-based learning. But one of the things that has come up often is the role of community, right? And so here we are in downtown Miami. There is all kinds of things happening around us, right? Outside, besides the construction that we can hear, right? That's always happening. But becomes a laboratory, right? We can take our students to make all sorts of analysis, the same way that you would do to go out in nature and count plants, look at plants. You can do the same kind of thing. You can, as Dr. Gonzalez was talking about earlier, you can have the students go look at service hubs for the unhoused communities, right? People that are experiencing homelessness. Even from the social sciences, there's all kinds of things that can be done here in our environment. So I think one of the things that needs to be done is awareness, opening people's eyes to the possibilities of what can be done. And for me, emphasizing the role of community. What kinds of connections can we do with stakeholders in these areas, whether it's finance, business, construction, development, services for low-income communities, for workers. So this is a laboratory, and how can we move forward to getting people out there to explore that in an educational setting, of course.
Well, for me, I love that, but that's the goal, right? So before that, we need to figure out a sort of alignment. We have to figure out what our course objectives are, and do they align with the institutional one? And I just went through Quality Matters certification, so please bear with me with the word alignment. But there really needs to be a connectivity, a thread between what we want to see and then tie it together with what the institution needs and wants are. But before we get to that, we need to look at how we're going to get the buy-in from administration through, the administrative paperwork and the management of every day, those technical things that happen when you're supposed to have a field trip. I don't know about my colleagues, but I'm getting way more high school students, dual enrollee students, and not just dual enrollment, but just students that are in high school and are attending my classes because they don't have English instructors in their high schools. It's a different program. So we need to find out what the logistics are to take those students out and about. I mean, my understanding is that if you have a dual enrollee, you can't pass them past Biscayne Boulevard. They can't cross that threshold with you, that kind of thing. So, taking them to Perez or things that are closer are even problematic. So what are the logistics? What are the management? What are the forms? What are the the legal ramifications, and make sure that there's an office working on those things so that when we come up with that brilliant idea, that community idea, those pieces of paper are available to us. The documentation is there so that we can distribute to our students so that they understand the process. And then we can go into how those lesson plans work with the class and how we align them with place-based learning. So it's important to have the administration really buy into it and spend the time necessary to create the forms, the documentation, all of those things that we will need if we need to rent a van and go to the Everglades, if we have dual enrollee students that need an extra level of parental permission, those kinds of things. And then finding, in terms of logistics, finding out with the commuter students as they come here and then just go to the garage and then go to their job, how to create that space for them to be able to participate in activities that are longer than 50 minutes, that are maybe 75 minutes or an hour and 40 minutes. Does that mean that certain courses that are going to be place-based learning-ish, adopt an hour and 40-minute schedule? So I look at those kinds of, technical things, so that once I know that those things are already together, then I can venture out and be a little bit more creative and say, okay, this time we're gonna start close to home. Next time we'll do something a little further out. But the paperwork, the documentation, all of that stuff's already done. That's really important.
So that was one of the questions that I was gonna ask, how can faculty be supported and encouraged to develop and participate in place-based learning initiatives? So I'm hearing that you need more of the administrative paperwork to kind of be kind of streamlined in a way, so that we have a process established.
Yeah, and the scheduling, right? This is another issue. And we've had conversations with Dr. Gonzalez about the paperwork, you know. So she's definitely looking into that. The other part that is, you know, is the class time, right? When we have these 50-minute classes, does that give us enough time to go out there into the places that we need to go? So certainly there's a lot of things that need to be thought out before we definitely start going out there into our communities for place-based learning.
Yeah.
But little projects can be done too.
I was just gonna add, so I've taught for Florida International University and Florida Gulf Coast University classes where we take students out on a regular basis into nature. And at those universities, you start off the term with the students just signing one waiver and one like emergency contact form. And that lasts through the whole term. So you don't have to do paperwork for every trip. It's just like, you know, there's a blanket waiver and then you're good to go for the whole term. And you can give several field trips. So that might be something for us to take into consideration. We might be able to adopt a model along those lines.
The next question I want to ask is, when you are implementing a place-based learning experience, what are some of the expectations that you want the students, that you expect from the students in your curriculum, in your design of the experience for your course? What kind of expectations, and if you're gonna tie it to a grade even?
Yeah, this is one of the issues that we discussed also in the group. Linking competencies to the excursions, if we might call it that, it's important and it's necessary in some contexts, right? For some fields, it's particularly easy because, you know, like anthropologists are by nature outside teachers, as Dr. Gonzalez was talking earlier, right? And so with a lot of the things that we do and that we have been teaching, like being out there is already kind of, you know, a pre-established thing. I lost my train of thought.
Expectations for your students.
Oh yeah. So definitely linking learning outcomes or competencies to the projects that we're doing is something that is very important for me. The other thing that I would say is very, very important is, and again, I think everyone that practices some form of place-based learning will have different objectives, but for me as a sociologist is to link those students to community partners that, you know, that impact can continue after that class is over, right? When I started grad school and I was thrown out into doing research in my community, I joined a bunch of organizations. I was a bit of an activist. I was still in my 20s and had energy for that kind of stuff. And that was a great learning experience. I participated, I was doing research. I was on the outside a little bit, but I was doing research with a lot of community organizations that were working in Miami to increase wages, to improve labor conditions. And so just being out there with those community partners, that laid the foundation for me to do my field work later for my dissertation. And then for years to come, all of those community partners were there for whenever I needed guest speakers in the classroom, for my students to get engaged in organizations. So I think for me, the important part is that whatever we do in the context of a project, it's something that is going to have a legacy, if I may, or right, that is going to leave the students something and the community with something that can continue going.
For me, I feel like I need to anchor the students, right? Anchor them to where they are. We have to fight for their attention so much, you know, with either social media, the technology, their attention towards us in the classroom. And they're not even paying attention to what's going on around them, you know. you see them, right, in their cars, and they're looking at their phones, and then there's this beautiful landscape. They're going over a bridge, Fifth Street Bridge, and you want to show them everything and tell them and point beautiful sights out, and they're here. So for me, one of my main objectives is to anchor them to Miami. You are here. This is the city in which you're living in. Do you know it? Do you know what the word Miami means? Where does it come from? Those kinds of things, because, you know, their attentions are elsewhere. Also, because of our population and the composition of our population, a lot of times they're here, they may be citizens or residents, and they're living in the United States or in Miami, but it's sort of like they're elevated up in the air because their mind is in Nicaragua, or their mind is in Cuba, or their mind is in Haiti, or their mind is in Europe even now, and they're not here. You know, they're not here. You're not present. You're not connecting with the city that you're living in. You know, you've never visited another part of town, for example. You've never gone to, you know, Key Biscayne. You never went up the tower. You know, there are a lot of really basic things that we could expose them to, and with our community partners, introduce them to, right? Through discussions with them and city leaders, etc. Most of them have gone through Miami-Dade College. They would be wonderful to have these individuals come to Miami-Dade and talk to them. How did they make it? You know, what neighborhood they came from, right? To try to anchor them. So anchoring them is the first thing that my major objective. You know, you're here now, you know, you're in Miami, you're in the United States. Yes, you might move to San Antonio next year, but right now you're here. How much can you learn about where you are, the power of now and of here? So anchoring is important for me. The other things are great. Learning, I learned something new today, I learned about the history, but just the anchoring and making sure that they're present is important to me.
I agree with that. I think that you can't really come to really care about a place or love a place until you learn about it and you know about it. And for my own personal experience of learning about, you know, Everglades ecology has really opened my eyes to South Florida, and, you know, looking around and realizing that that's a native tree or it's a native plant, and kind of getting that sense of context. So I think that's really important for our students, that if we can get them to care about where they are, then I think that will translate into that they will understand that we're not just trying to teach them abstract concepts, but we're teaching them stuff that really impacts their day-to-day lives in a real way. And then that should translate to that they care more about what they're learning and they'll have more success.
So one last question. What is your vision for the future of place-based learning for the students here at the Wolfson campus, for the students that are participating in Earth Institute, thinking about that future and what kind of experiences you want those students to have or to learn about Wolfson, about
Well,
you want to start?
I guess I'll start. I mean, like I was saying earlier, I think that in any given area around any of our campuses, there's so much to learn about. You know, even here in downtown Miami, you know, the Miami Circle, you know, and the Tequesta and all that history. So I would really want students to just have that kind of holistic, you know, knowledge of the area, and hopefully be able to connect with it through that.
Yeah, for me, it's making connections, something you just mentioned. I remember vividly when I was in grad school, there was an article that we read about Overtown, how building I-95 back in the 50s, and then 395, like a decade later, was part of the plan to destroy Overtown. But no faculty member ever took us there, right? Like we read that, and we're a little older in grad school, you can go there on your own. But I think it's important to have the students, we have this opportunity, we have so much rich history and sociological, anthropological knowledge, right, of like the area just around us. So, you know, if the students are reading about Overtown, then it's right there. You can take the Metro Mover and then walk a few blocks and then, right, see it. So I think for me, the goal would be linking a little bit more of that history that they're reading, that sociology, anthropology, and then taking them there and say, this is what that actually looks like. So I think that'll be really good way of strengthening our curriculum or lessons.
Yeah, the same for me, starting slowly, measured, in a measured way, not all disciplines lend themselves exactly the same way. So for me, English and writing, of course, maybe reading a little excerpt of the biography of Mary Brickell or things like that, that really can get them thinking about Brickell's not just a place to go to the Blue Martini, right? It's a place to, is that still there? I don't know. It's been a while. But it's an institution. Oh, okay, like well, let me okay. But that Mary Brickell was an actual person, and these are things, that you can just throw out in lectures and things like that. And I have, and they're like, Brickell, what do you mean? It's where so-and-so lives, or that's where we go out. And it's like, well, do you know about Mary Brickell? So, you can do little mini lessons like that, teaching them, the hidden curriculum, right? You're teaching them not only the discipline, but other things that are important for them to learn, and they'll remember it. They'll remember it because you just drop a little. Oh yeah, she was, Henry Flagler. Flagler, have you walked over there? You know what he did? And they'll remember it because you're weaving it into the lesson. You're weaving it into the lesson. It could be anything as simple as capital letters or something, or just reinforcing certain things. And you can always bring the place that you're living in into your lessons, but you have to know about it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was suggesting last time at our meeting was, in Bayside, you could pick up those double-decker buses.
Yeah,
There used to be a trolley, and the trolley was nicer. But one of the things is, I would love to know what they're talking about. I want to see what they're saying about Miami, how accurate it is. What do they say exactly when they're driving through Coconut Grove? What do they say exactly when they're going through Wynwood? Are they going to talk about the Puerto Rican influence? And those kind of things, just to do like a recognizance, like what are these people talking about the city, and then talking to other leaders and historians. And we talked about exploring the archives. You have beautiful archives, and that's not used, I think, the way we need to use it, the archives here, just to gather information first. And then once we feel a little bit better, at least this is how I operate. I need to know what I'm talking about before I tell other people what they're doing, what they should be doing, or what they should be learning. Getting real good assessment of where I am, and then coming up with ideas to present to my classes, to my students. And then the PBL group being that generator of more and more ideas, and hopefully have an archive of lesson plans and ideas and things like that to house. Talk about a manual, because how to do a place-based assignment, how to do a place-based lesson. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Speaking about the faculty that you're part of, what role does that faculty learning community about this learning play in successfully implementing or developing your idea of this learning? Has it helped you? Are there resources that you are hearing from each other? Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with the PBL, or play-based learning faculty learning community, and how can you as a faculty, does it help you develop your curriculum and implementation, or thinking about the next steps of implementation of place-based?
I think the group does several things. At its most basic form, there's a lot of bouncing off of ideas, right? Faculty member might say, what about this? What about this? Some faculty members in that group are from NTech, from engineering. And so sometimes they're, for that particular faculty, was like, okay, I have no idea how to input. So there was a lot of like, us telling them, like, you could do this, you could try this, you could try this. So there's this wonderful thing that happens when people that are other professionals in different fields, but here in our institution, bouncing ideas of what is possible. I think that's been one of the best things. The other thing is it's pushed us to consider new things, right? It's like, I never thought about that before. Maybe I can do that. And very importantly, I think one of the things that we are doing, a couple of things that we're doing is identifying roadblocks, identifying barriers, identifying some of the issues like class times, like paperwork that needs to be signed. And the other thing is that there is an excitement about the group to create, like you were saying earlier, guides, right, manuals, to promote the ideas that are coming. So it serves us both as an incubator and as a learning process for the faculty that are in there as well. And I think that has been great for that.
Yeah, I've been teaching here a long time, and getting involved in a TLC has really reinvigorated, me. And I know that the people that have been involved in either PBL or emotional intelligence or any of the faculty learning communities feel invigorated. Like for the first time, we're with other faculty members, we're doing things, we're traveling to places, we're bouncing off ideas, we're rethinking a lot about what we've been doing here. And we hadn't had that in a really, really long time. Before certain things would come from the department, a very disciplined level. But now with the TLC, we get to be with people from different disciplines all the time, and to get to do things together and learn. And I hadn't seen that in a really, really long time at the college. So I'm really grateful, because, when you do year 10, year 20, after a while, you kind of want to shut down and not be involved in things. So I'm very grateful for Gwen and Jeff and Franley from before that introduced me to TLC, because otherwise I would just be in the doldrums, taking my summer off, and then later working on my syllabus because I'm going to start the fall semester. But there are different activities that we do together. And we have our faculty learning communities that meet in person, over lunch, through Teams, through Zoom. We have our phone numbers. I had phone numbers now of faculty members, and before, no one would share their faculty. But since we're part of a faculty learning community, we have each other's phone numbers. And not only do we talk business, but we also talk other things. And I hadn't experienced that in a while here at the college. So thanks to the TLC.
It's been great.
Yeah, look at that.
Professor Lucio, who you mentioned earlier, is on that group. So, and Professors Frolic and Henry, who have had their campus laboratory, proposal. So, and then there's some of us that have done other kinds of things like study abroad. It's been great. There's all of these people that have already done some kind of place-based learning, but very intuitively, right? There was no theory before we engaged in all of those projects. So now what we're getting is a little bit of like actual theory and learning, like doing readings as well. So it's interesting to match what some of us have been doing with like the theories and the literature that there exists on place-based learning, to put those things together. So it's been fun like that. Yeah.
So to echo what Professor Villar was saying, I think that this is a great example of a curriculum enhancement that can help faculty to kind of bring what they're teaching up to the next level, or maybe reinvigorate them, bring new life to what you're doing. It also speaks of the importance of interdisciplinary or even transdisciplinary collaboration, that synergy that happens when you're working together like that. We've been kind of working with variations of faculty learning communities for several years, actually, with the Earth Ethics Institute through GSOLs, and we have something called a campus learning community that's kind of an adaptation of that model. But we're looking forward to doing a true faculty learning community, hopefully in the fall for GSOLs, and to have a cohort of faculty that can really take a deep dive into what global sustainability and Earth literacy are about.
And how can emerging technologies or digital tools do you feel can enhance the experience of place-based learning for your students? And I think that speaks volumes to your creativity, your innovation in your courses, looking ahead to the future, thinking about how some of these tools or technologies help in your place-based learning experience.
I think one thing that maybe we don't take enough advantage of, but for place-based learning is, you know, we all have a smartphone that has like some kind of map thing, Google Maps or whatever it is. And so that's a great tool. You know, we have like global maps with 3D renderings in our pockets. You know, what can we do with that in the classroom?
You wanna go?
We are.
There was some conversations about this in the group, right? Like, because those having the students in a virtual reality environment, does that, you know,
Yeah.
even though you are taking the students there, and if you weren't any of those goggles, like you really feel like you're there. Your brain is confused. You know, it's like, am I really here? And so there is this discussion about how pertinent, you know, will virtual reality environments to place-based learning. However, I have a good friend who teaches at FIU, and she's been doing something really interesting with Google Maps, right? With Street View. So where I think the farthest you can go back in some of those are 2007, 2008, even before that, I believe, in some areas. And so I was playing with it the other day, and then I put the camera on Street View in a Wynwood street. And then at the bottom, you can choose the year that picture was taken in the same street. So you can go back 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. So when you go back 15 years, you have this Wynwood that was, when I moved to Wynwood in 07, that was by Wynwood. Warehouses, right? A lot of, you know, empty lots. And so it's really interesting because you can really tell the story of Wynwood by using street maps or any other area that has gone through rapid change, right? So as long as you're supporting, I think, taking the students out there as well will be important, right? Not just keeping them confined to the Street View. We do need that laboratory nonetheless, even if we can provide a lot of the work through virtual reality environments.
Yeah, you know, take what they like to do, right? They love YouTube.
Yeah.
Have them do a YouTube video of their campus, you know, have them hear them, listen to them, right? And then other young people will listen to them. You know, I would rather watch, if I were a young person, I want to see another young person give me the tour of Wolfson Campus. I want to hear the point of view of a young person of the circle, right? And just by hearing a younger voice with the terminology that they use and the cadence that they use to describe places within Miami would really, really help. So I've been, you know, tinkering a little bit, you know, with, you know, the Canvas ability to, you know, record messages on their papers mostly, but, you know, back and forth. And then, you know, it's triggering some ideas of things that I could do, but it has to do with recording them and their voice, because that's what I teach, writing and their voice and their words and their ideas. So I want to be able to capture that in a particular way. But again, you know, we have to make sure that we have, you know, those pieces of documentation. You know, is something like this allowed? You know, who can listen to, you know, these kinds of things and et cetera. It's not just for me. So yeah, the legal department would need to do a lot of explaining of how certain things would work in the classroom for me to be able to feel more comfortable, right? And proprietorship also, right? Who owns this? If I create this idea with my students and it's wonderful, who owns it? You know, does the student's voice, do they own their own voice? Or is it from the institution? So, you know, those kind of little things like that I always think about sometimes that I think make a difference into whether someone participates in something.
Thank you, all three of you, for your feedback, your insight, and your creativity and innovation into, you know, giving the students the experience of the experience of I was going to ask, any audience member have any questions for the panelists? Zoila.
I have a question. I am interested, coming from Learning Resources, as to how do you see us supporting you?
Conversation to have also on the,
like resources, books and videos
Right.
and things like that about
Well,
local.
we also have, for example, like you mentioned, the VR.
virtual reality.
goggles. We can create a map for you, we can create content, we can bring the maybe Bayside that you can't go over there, but maybe
Right.
we can bring Bayside over
Bayside.
here. So there's a lot of things that we can do. So I wanted to see how you see us as a partner in this endeavor.
Yeah, in the past, I've worked with librarians here to create LibGuides to some of my classes. And so that would probably be also really interesting, right? If, you know, whatever area, if some students are going to the Tequesta Circle, then we can definitely create digital resources that students can see before. Or there's probably a million other things.
We'll invite you to one of our.
Yeah, that would be great.
I have a question. So, thank you. I want to know how we can reach faculty, because as you were mentioning today, you know, there's so much to learn about Miami. And many of you have heard about our Civic Active Scorecard, where we have go to a live arts museum, learn about the native plants, visit a place of natural historic community, take a guided walk, visit a farmer's market, take public transportation, research the indigenous community, who are your elected officials. So we already have maybe we shouldn't call it the Civic Active Scorecard, but the place-based scorecard.
Yeah.
And more people wouldn't go into it because we have 90+ actions with guided conversations. In 2 to 3 sentences, what did you do? The what, the so what, and the now what. And it has everything from arts and culture, your civic engagement, environment and sustainability. And faculty can either implement it as a requirement or as extra credit. So it doesn't take much, but Maria, you said it. You've done 20 years of teaching. This is my curriculum. This is how I did it. It is so hard to get faculty to bring in new ideas, but everything that you all touched in, just here, I was taking notes. I just listed over 30 of the actions that are space-based learning that are easy to implement, and I'd be more than happy to do a workshop, because whether you're teaching math, science, biology, history, send it.
Yeah.
So help me.
Yeah.
My question to you is, how can I get faculty?
I think and I don't know necessarily it has taken some time to take off, or you know, but groups like this, like the learning communities, might help provide maybe more training more often. If there are workshops and things that are done in community, I think it would be better than a professor just clicking through a Canvas module on their own. You know, that works for some things, but if what you're trying to create is a little bit of a hype, and right, I think putting us together would probably work out. Would be great. Yeah.
Also,
Change making week.
we're getting through, we're in the process of getting faculty professional development of place-based learning approved. So it's already, I think, high in the ranks. So when we have that, we'd love to have you come in and discuss.
moduling.
Everything you touched, I was like, oh yeah, that's interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one.
And so, Kiki, I think what that shows is that we already do have some form of infrastructure, right? Plans, projects that we can do here that some of us are doing. There's also professors on their own doing all kinds of activities. Now there is what I perceive to be a push, and I don't mean that word in a negative way, right? From our administration to particularly from the president's office, right? To engage in place-based learning. So I think there is a space here to put all of these things together in creative ways, right?
We have Professor Henry on the chat. He said, I think lessons on the Freedom Tower next year would be great, commemorating its 100th year. Could we create a site dedicated to the Freedom Tower and post lessons, podcasts, videos, poems, etc.?
Yeah.
That's a great idea, Professor Henry. In the library.
Zoila.
Yes, that's a call for you, Zoila. So that we can get those resources and have one central place for faculty to connect with learning resources and resources about the history of the Freedom Tower and a lot of the local Mary Brickell, a lot of history around here that our students can connect to. Maybe we can have a place-based learning event. Experience Wolfson.
Yeah, at the heart of it all. Isn't that it?
Any other questions? Anything else on the chat? Thank you, everybody, for joining us in this great conversations about place-based learning.
Thanks for supporting, and I think that was the word I was looking for rather than pushing back. Thank you for the support from your office. Thank you so much. Oh, these are wonderful. Vacation.
Thank you, Zoila, for hosting this. This was a great session, and it was very informative, and it was nice to have our faculty come out and talk about their experiences.
Let's do this more often.
Yes.
Thank you all.